Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Rosario, and I'm a principal software engineer here at Zynga, where we make games that millions of people love to play every day. And today I'm going to talk about how you can build and maintain successful, highly distributed teams. So what do I mean about successful? In this, we're going to define as high-performing and communicative teams. And this is going to be very paramount, especially when you're working across a large distribution of different offices. So where does the strategy come from? I'm happy to say that I've been developing a brand new mastery game of my team of over 70 plus team members, and this is across many disciplines in 5 plus different studios, including our outsourcing, and in 3 different time zones, which you can imagine this is a lot of different organization and coordination to do among this team of this magnitude. And I'm happy to say that we've refined the system over the past 2.5 years, and I've been able to leverage these learnings in our women leadership employee resource group, Women at Zynga, as well as our engineering leadership forum for our senior leads and our university relation partnerships. And the great news about this strategy is that when we were all transitioning to work from home, this was not a huge shock. We had already been operating as a distributed team for quite a while among these different studios, so work from home wasn't too big of a shock, although I will talk about some of the challenges that we did encounter a little bit later. So let's talk about the price you'll have to pay for a distributed team. And I'm not talking about the raw dollar amounts. I'm talking about a value that is even more important, which is your investment into your team and their success. And we're going to start with the P, which is productivity, how you can help establish good work environments and resources, as well as scheduling and milestones. The R of responsiveness, setting core hours and being flexible with the arrangements. The I, or interaction of social, so that you can establish a connection within your team and they don't feel isolated. The C, or communication, so you can have consistent and relevant updates, as well as a way for receiving and giving effective feedback. And finally, but most importantly, employees, the E, so that you can help grow their morale, their visibility, and ultimately grow them into leaders that can be self-autonomous as well as proactive and help getting your team to go where they need to go. So the first half here is going to talk about some of the mechanics, and the second half is going to be more of the human touch. So let's jump right into it. Productivity. I mentioned earlier about establishing an effective work environment. So this is going to be some quick basics at you. You're going to want to help your team find a dedicated room for them to enhance their focus and enforce their work integrity so that they can actually make sure they do their job within the core hours. And this goes without saying, but they need to have essential equipment such as their laptop, peripherals, quality chair, and desk. And I mentioned the quality chair and desk because they're going to be sitting here for a while, so you don't want, a uncomfortable chair or desk that you're finding yourself having ergonomic issues. Next, you're going to have the software, such as your VPN, email, Slack, Jira, and whatever development tools you use. And I put a plug in here for natural lighting because I mentioned earlier that you do want to make sure people have good core hours, and natural lighting can help boost their mood as well as reinforce what are natural stopping points so that they can become easily engulfed in their work. And this might be good for short-term productivity, but over the long haul, it can lead to burnout, and that's not great. So natural lighting can help people manage their time. Next, you're going to want to set some clear tasks and checkpoints, as well as the milestone dates. And this is great for games because we can have playable progress where you can check in on the iteration, and then this informs you how you can change the direction as needed. I do want to stress here you should allow some fungibility pending circumstances. Sometimes our estimates don't match up with the reality, and that's okay as long as we can reassess the priorities as needed and then make sure we target the new dates. And I mentioned earlier about the work environment. You also have to provide resources and support to do the job for your employees. And ergonomic equipment I mentioned earlier, but also access to information such as wikis, your experts, and channels for your employees to go find the people they need to reach out to so they can do their job effectively. Now, let's talk about responsiveness. I said earlier about core office hours, and for us, again, in this North American kind of time zones of 3 different time zones, we have our core office hours as 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. PST. And this helps us because we are able to talk with the bulk of our team during these set hours, where any other hour we might become on too late or too early for other people in the office to go see each other. I also want to encourage you to make sure your team takes intentional breaks. I mentioned earlier, burnout is real, and again, sounds great in the short term to have people working really hard because they're always at work/home when they're in a remote situation, but the intentional breaks are needed for people to recharge as well as have a fresh mindset when they come back to work. And Along that vein of intentional breaks, encourage some flexibility. And what I mean about this is now that a majority of us are in a work from home situation, there are some additional challenges that people are encountering within their homes, such as managing shared responsibilities among children or pets. And this is okay. We expect this to happen because there is life, right? So you need to make sure that people understand it's okay for them to take some away time for 30 minutes to an hour, as well as they just signal that they're going to be away during these certain time periods and then signal when they're going to return. And this is great and it's worked for us because then we know when people are available and we know when we can reach them. That said, some time slots may be non-negotiable, and the big key here is probably the team meetings when you need your key stakeholders there. You want to maximize your meeting time with specific agendas and action items in advance so people know what to expect when they come into the meeting, as well as follow up with captured meeting minutes and the follow-up items so people know what to do after. And this is especially helpful for people both who went to the meetings and people who were unable to attend the meetings, so they know what to do after the meetings have occurred. Now, let's talk about some of the human touch here. And I put interaction here /social because it is really easy to feel isolated or your team to feel isolated when they're away from the office. There are fewer emergent moments for water cooler talk to happen. And unless your direct reports are really good about making time to do DMs with each other and keep that kind of human touch, they can start feeling a lack of connection within the team, and that can make them feel have lower morale. So as the boss, you should be providing opportunities for your team to socialize. And for us, we've done things like virtual happy hours or events. And this would be jumping on a Zoom call, wearing some silly hats. Like I got a bunch of pirate hats. I like wearing those. Or you can use filters to check out like how silly everyone looks. So something fun and lighthearted. Other ways for you to encourage socialization is to have dedicated channels for community. So great ones to think about are off topic, or for us at Zynga, we are dog parents. So a dog channel where you could post all your Instagram pictures of your dogs, or even new games to talk about things like Animal Crossing or Resident Evil. So these are just some of the ideas for you to consider so that people have a community and they can go talk and reach out to each other. And I want to put a plug in here for your employee resource groups as well as your benefits and wellness programs, because this is probably like one of the easier, well, I don't want to say easier, but probably one of the more obvious things you can think about as community building, as well as enforcing and encouraging good work-life balance. But most of all, you should be reminding your direct reports of their value to your team, the project, and the company to help foster that connection feeling. And speaking of the team, let's talk about how you're going to communicate with the team. I mentioned earlier you want to have consistent and relevant updates. And some of you may already be employing Scrum in your own development cycle. We also use this, and we like to do a combination of both in-person and Slack reminder integrations. So on Mondays, we'll all jump on a Zoom call and we will all give our updates and talk about blockers. And then on Wednesdays and Fridays, we have a Slack reminder pop up and tell us, hey, it's time for virtual Scrum. So we could just write in a sentence or two of what we're working on in the Slack channel and then be on our way. I really want to highlight the importance of blockers, because if you don't encourage people to mention when they get blocked in a remote environment, it becomes even more detrimental for people to fall down if they get far behind. And also, you don't want Scrum updates to become one-worders such as bugs, which doesn't help anybody with anything. Also, when you think about updates, encourage your employees to think about proactive FYIs. And what I mean about proactive FYIs is encourage them to think about what is someone going to ask them or want to know about in their future development, so they can go ahead and give that update and be more effective in their communication. And this in turn will help reduce interruptions of them during their work, so that people don't have to go interrupt them to figure out what they're doing. You want to also encourage questions. I mentioned earlier, it's easy for people to get stuck and spin their wheels. So if you can, try to anticipate difficult areas your employees might encounter and then offer guidance when possible or resources for them to do the job. And again, reinforce that it's okay to ask questions. It doesn't make you any less knowledgeable or any less skilled. It just means that there's something you need to learn. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then provide opportunity for people to actually communicate with you so you can have process improvements. We've done this really effectively within our teams. We have senior leads as well as leads within the different disciplines. And so our leads will talk with the people they're leading and then bring that up to the senior leads, who will invite and listen for the input from all these different voices. And we use these voices in informal check-ins to make sure that we can actually improve our process so that we have a better development process for everyone. Now that we talked about the team, let's talk about your one-on-one communication. So it goes without saying, face-to-face, video on, is crucial for an effective one-on-one. Not only does it allow you to seem more human, but it also helps you read those nonverbal cues that you wouldn't otherwise get if you didn't have that, or if you were going through just cold emails, which you should never do, by the way. You should always have direct connection with them through vid chat if possible. Now, some of you may have already seen this, but it bears going to say again, effective feedback needs to be specific. You need to describe what the issue is, as well as descriptive, using facts, not your interpretation of what happened in this situation, and timely. So it needs to be hopefully sooner rather than later. 6 months down the road doesn't help people figure out how to improve themselves. And I also want to highlight here the importance of an appropriate amount of feedback. When you give feedback, you might have a lot you want to say, but keep in mind how much your direct report can actually absorb and space it out within, again, a timely manner. Also, wrap up your feedback with your willingness to discuss it further. I think this is critical, and most people forget this, because you want to make sure it's a dialogue and not just you just talking at your employee. So give them the opportunity to ask clarifying questions, follow up, and then solicit their thoughts about what they think about the feedback. Now, on the flip side, I mentioned earlier you want to get feedback to help refine your own processes. So when you do receive feedback, make sure you do these things. You want to acknowledge that you got the feedback, and then confirm your understanding of the feedback. Repeat it back to the person giving you feedback to make sure you really understand what they told you. And then share how you're going to utilize that feedback. If you don't know at the moment, be honest and just say, hey, this is great feedback. I'd like to think about it some more, and I'll follow up with you about what we could do with it. And then actually go do the thing you said you're going to do and follow up. And I want to talk about employees here. So I mentioned earlier, ultimately, for you to have these highly effective teams, you need to manage your employees well. And this involves managing the morale or the recognition. We've done a couple of things such as health surveys, as well as just being aware of our team and inquiring. Health surveys can be okay for getting metrics, but I wouldn't rely on that alone. You do need to actually get in the weeds and talk to people face-to-face, or at least direct message them. We also use Employee of the Month, or kudos, at our all hands to help give recognition and improve that morale. Be aware some people might not like all that attention, so if you feel like someone might not like that, reach out to them first about it and then see if they're okay with you doing that kind of kudos. You want to help people shine, so you want to increase their visibility. And some of the ways you can do this is encouraging them to contribute to the team. They can do this with tech talks or sharing their knowledge through wikis. They can also lead in different events. So you really want to make sure you help publicly praise their contributions to the key stakeholders. Not only does this help you tell them that you're aware of what they're doing, but it also highlights their contributions to other people so that they are aware of what your direct reports are doing. And I mentioned the leadership opportunities earlier. You could do this by inviting your direct reports to lead features or meetings and updates. Not only does this build their leadership skills, it also contributes to their feelings of ownership, which makes them very highly engaged. And this morale and visibility all funnel into growth. And the way you can even enhance the growth further is understand your employees' career aspirations. Talk to them about this in one-on-ones. And then when you can, align project demands with matching tasks, making sure that you can actually give them the opportunity to grow and expand their skill set. And this will ultimately set them up for success. Now, you might be saying, Michelle, that's a lot of information all at once about the price you have to pay to have highly effective teams. And I'm going to distill this into a couple of key categories for you. So the key strategies here for you to ultimately maintain are, 1, you're going to cultivate the productivity, autonomy, and leadership skills within your team, as well as open up access and channels for open communication so people can give you feedback and you can deliver feedback. Next, you're going to advocate for your team's visibility and recognition. And this is paramount to having them maintain good morale as well as engagement. And follow up that advocacy with growth opportunities for the assignments and roles so they can become those leaders I mentioned earlier. Next, you're going to reflect on the team feedback and performance that you're observing and use this to refine your process even more because, let's face it, the process doesn't start off perfect from the get-go. Our process might need tweaking for your situation, so refine it as you need. And finally, you're going to engage both your direct reports and your key stakeholders with these strategies as well as maintaining consistent effort, because you can't just do this once and then call it done. It's an ongoing effort. You need to keep maintaining this. And ultimately, you might have noticed I like acronyms, so this spells out CARE. This is going to help you take care of your team so they can be successful and you can help maintain that excellence. And with that, my name is Michelle Del Rosario. I'm a Principal Software Engineer here at Zynga, and thank you for listening to me talk. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Well, I'm back. Thank you, Michelle. That was brilliant. I'm going to give you a round of applause as I have for everyone else. Like I've been saying, I'm sure everyone would if they could, but we can't hear them. So yeah, but it's always nice to have some feedback. But yeah, I thought that was excellent. I think it definitely, as you say, shows how to get the most out of your team, whether you're growing or whether you have that bigger team now. But I think right now it's obviously more important than ever as we move, for, oh, there you go. We've got some clapping in the chat. But I think it's important now when we're all working virtually. And as I want to say to everyone before I ask my inevitable question, because I've always got questions, if you do have a question, pop it in the Q&A. You'll see that tab below, and I will get to it and ask Michelle any of your questions. But one thing I wanted to ask while I've got you is, obviously things are changing at the moment, with everything that's happening around the world. Have you found that the teams have taken a lot of time to adapt? Has it been a big adaptation for you and maintaining that team morale, or has it been somewhat seamless?
So, great question. It's been a little bit of everything. So mostly seamless because, as I mentioned earlier, we've been operating in this kind of distributed manner for quite a number of years now. I will say the biggest challenges is, while we may know operationally how to handle ourselves, that work environment part is really critical from before, because I'll say here, I have a little dog at home and she's my pride and joy. And oh my gosh, she wants so much attention. And I was not used to that. Even though I've brought her into the office a couple of times, it's a different environment for her to be like, oh, you're home all the time, let's play. So I imagine people have this with their pets as well as their children too, right? They want attention. So managing that, and I mentioned this earlier, which is you really want to make sure that you can dedicate time to your family as well as to your work. And as long as you can signal when you're going to be out and make that time for your family, because you don't want either one to suffer. It really is critical to have good work-life balance, even more so when you're in this virtual environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally right as well. It's even now as I sit here, and as I'm sure we all sit here, I'm sure many of us will have other distractions going on around the house, and it's about, getting that blend of attention in different areas. We have had a question from one of our attendees, remaining anonymous, which is totally fine. That's the beauty of this. But a good question, I think, is like, so how would you, Michelle, advise broaching the topic of crunch and burnout to an unsympathetic boss?
Thank you for this question, first of all. So how would I approach this topic of burnout with an unsympathetic boss? I wonder, do you have anyone else in the team who is on the same level as this boss who is sympathetic to your plight? And you can talk to that person, because as I mentioned earlier, you do want to have some advocacy. And if you feel like one person can't be the advocate for you, try to find someone else who can either, one, convince that person or be an advocate for you, because if the more people are advocating for this, the reality is that it'll give even more different viewpoints for this boss of yours to hopefully, consider it a little bit more deeply and think about what they could do. I would also say, when you broach this topic, make sure you are very clear, like I said, with the feedback about what is the situation, what have you been noticing. Use the facts, like, hey boss, we've been working 12 plus hours and we're not getting sleep. That's just facts, right? Hopefully you're not doing that. But if you are, like, be real about it, right? And then you also want to make sure that you try to provide some solutions. Like, hey, we're working really long hours. Can we split up the day somehow? Can I have some time to do this other thing? And this will make it easier, because when you just come with problems all the time to the boss, while that's great, you're giving your feedback, it makes it very difficult for the boss to figure out, well, how can I solve this? Because they might give a solution that they think is suitable, but it may be completely unsuitable for you. So if you can give a suitable answer that you would be looking for, that helps them narrow down, okay, well, maybe I can't give all this, but now that I have an understanding of what they're looking for, what about this solution? And it really is just that collaboration on try to getting a ground that you both can stand on.
So it's about, yeah, it's about collaboration, but you know, I think from what I take from you, it's also about, as hard as it may seem, taking the emotion out of it and keeping it directly to the facts, and you know, yeah, keeping that professionalism to it nonetheless.
Right. And again, keeping the collaboration of trying to figure out solutions, right? You're both
Yeah.
trying to work to a solution together. You can't just dump it on someone and be like, well, I hope they solve it the way I want when they don't know what you want.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. It's, yeah, we're not looking for problems, we're looking for solutions, sort of thing. Yeah, that's great. We've had a few more questions come in now. Well, I'll get to Neil's question first because I can personally help with some of that. Neil asks, is the PowerPoint available for share? Now, I'll let Michelle answer as to whether she has it for share. But one thing I will say, which I'm sure is something that, you know, it relies, well, it certainly does attribute to every single speaker, is we'll obviously, all of these talks will be going up online within the next coming days. And as part of that, you know, the slideshow that was shared as part of the screen will, you know, I think is part of the available videos. So I think that hopefully answers that, even if there is no additional sharing. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't see any issue with sharing, but happy to follow up with you just offline in case.
Yeah. So there you go, Neil. You've got Michelle's contact details right there, as I can see. So yeah, feel free to ask. But we'll obviously have these available very soon as well, including everything else from part one this morning and all of our other tracks. So one of our anonymous attendees asked, can you give some more information about the 70+ team working on the new match 3 game? Which titles, etc. Now, I'm sure a lot of that will be under some kind of NDA and everything, but you know, I'll let Michelle answer.
I am super excited to talk about it. I'm not at liberty to share too much more detail. The most I can say, and I know it's not super satisfying, but you know, keep your eyes out. Like, we have some exciting news coming soon. So I'm sure you'll know when it comes out very soon.
So there's a little tease there, and you know, it's good to know that everything is still moving forward, I suppose, despite everything else that we see in the world. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's really exciting. So yeah, keep your eyes, ears, and everything else peeled, anonymous attendee. Arjun has also asked, there are some members in each team who are, well, Arjun's put, too lazy to send out regular updates on Slack. Any advice? I suppose that can also be attributed maybe to some people who aren't as tech savvy as some other members of the team. I mean, I suppose that, you know, if I'm not being too much at liberty, is I suppose it's, how do you work with those members who maybe aren't giving as much feedback as you might like?
So that is a great question. And not knowing the full situation that you're describing, Arjun, I would say you want to make sure that, one, if you haven't already, reached out to them and talked to them, like, hey, you know, can you tell me about your updates, why you give these kind of updates like this? And really just specify like what it is you're hoping to get out of them. Like, I really appreciate if you would spend more time to write about what you're working on, what blockers you have, and whatever you're looking for from them, right? And if to your point about quote unquote lazy, they're just not doing it, maybe they don't see it as a high priority. And so reinforce as like, this is really high priority for us to understand how we can help you. Like, make sure it's like, it's not just like give us information because we're just like, you know, micromanaging you. It's also because it's helping the team somehow. And when people understand that it helps in a bigger picture, I think they're more likely to be like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll help with that. Doesn't sound bad.
Yeah, well, there we go. Oh, I should mark some of these as answered. So next question from another anonymous attendee, or maybe it's the same anonymous attendee, is, well, first of all, they say, hi, Michelle, thank you for your presentation. So, and then also one question, regarding the work everyone is doing, do you track hours? Like, are you monitoring hours?
So we don't monitor them like, you know, hardcore, like, oh my gosh, you have to, you know, put every little hour, clock in, clock out. We do use Jira. We actually used Handsoft previously, where we would say, hey, we estimate it's going to take like, you know, a week to do this thing. And then you check in. This is where the milestones comes into play. Like, after people give their estimates, you set those milestone dates so you can actually check what's going on. And this helps not only keep people accountable, but also, again, give more information about what's going on, like the communication. So that's what's worked for us, where we ask for your estimates, and then we're not going to micromanage every little hour of your day, but we are just going to see, like, you committed to having this done by some time frame. Let's go check at that time frame. And we're understanding that some things take a little longer. Something emerges that you didn't anticipate or didn't account for. and that's totally fine. As long as you can, reassess that and reevaluate. It's going to take another 5 hours or something, and then just go do it. Do your best to get it in.
So I suppose it's more about having targets rather than literally micromanaging every moment of someone's work existence. I suppose that pertains to what you're saying about work culture. I'm sure having been in some of those environments in the past, it doesn't do much for work morale when every single minute is being monitored. But, of course, you want to make sure that people are delivering on the targets and the work that's been assigned to them.
Right. And sometimes if they can't deliver, if it's hey, I thought this thing was going to just be okay for me. Sometimes if we have capacity, we'll try to get someone else to help them too, right? Just because at the end of the day, we all want to make really great games. So it's just a team effort.
Yeah, totally. We've had another question, which is, how do you decide the number of people in different teams? Is there any, anything you can share on that?
I guess, could I get a little bit more of a follow-up? What is this question asking more about?
So I will allow them to post a little bit more maybe into the chat. But what I have is, how do you decide the number of people in the different teams? So if it was me asking that question, I suppose I would be wondering, do you work on a certain team working on something is always at a certain size, or do you shift depending on the priorities, depending on how much work needs to go into certain areas? Do you have people who are floating between departments, I suppose?
Okay. In that case, so part of it is kind of obviously gated by our head count, what are we able to assign for how many heads we can have. The next part is maybe we get people as loaners, right? Hey, we need someone for the central tech integration. We'll loan out, or we'll receive a loan from another team for a month or so, and then they go back, right? And the great news is we can still interact with that person if we need to get follow-up, but hopefully they just help speed up the process on that one integration, then we can move forward, right? I don't think we really have a specific, in terms of, well, we can only have this many people, but when we do expand, it's because we have I would say, a really well-defined plan about what needs to be done and how much hours or how much effort and people are involved to make it work, and that's how we can help open and close headcounts as needed.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that really helps. Well, I think that gets us through all of our Q&As and quite nicely brings us to time. So thank you so much, Michelle, for coming and being a part of it. I really hope you enjoyed being a part of this digital experience for our first Pocket Gamer Connects Digital.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks again for having me. And thank you everyone for taking the time to come listen. I'm really glad to be here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.